Welcome back to another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast presented by the Kings Herald. My name is Brendan Nunes, and today we're joined by Jill Adge of the Ethos Kings podcast and one of the best basketball minds on Kings Twitter. What's going on, Jill? How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Doing good, yeah. Thanks for joining me. Always good talking with you. We're recording right after the Kings lost to the Chicago Bulls, 125-118. The plan for today is to kind of, this is the last game before the trade deadline. We've seen 4 games, I believe it is, of Domantas Sabonis and Justin Holiday, and now 3 games of Donte DiVincenzo. And Trey Lyles and Josh Jackson fall into that as well. So I think the plan today is to just kind of talk about what we've seen from the new guys since they've been acquired. And, it's going to be a lot of small sample size stuff, but I think it's interesting to note some of the differences because I think there are things that stand out. And the first thing I want to ask you, at the end of this Bulls game, they look like they were out of it. I mean, realistically, they were out of it. I think they were down 10 points with 2 minutes left. And it even, they had some ugly turnovers, I think, after that. But they kept fighting through that and gave full effort until the very end. And am I crazy for being optimistic about that?
No, I feel like 2 weeks ago they would have gotten blown out. There wouldn't have been a fight back. I mean, you would have seen guys put up, some flashy stats. But that you wouldn't have seen actually a fight back, even with less than a minute. I mean, they had a couple threes they were still, throwing up. I can see we were asking prior to the deadline, show me you care. I can see these guys being pissed off and caring. Unfortunately, it's just not translating, but I'm not crazy disappointed they lost to the number one team in the East. I think a lot of people, because I saw this earlier on the timeline, as soon as, people look at who's out, they automatically think, oh, the Kings should win because, the Bulls have players out. But they've had players out all season and their main guys, over multiple months worth. And at least with Caruso and Ball, it's been over a month. I mean, obviously more with Caruso compared to Ball, but Ball's been out for over a month now. Levine was pretty recent, but they're 7-3 in their last 10. They're one of the top 3-point shooting teams in the league. They have DeRozan, who has 5 straight 35 plus, point games, shooting 50%. And then you have, Vooch damn low. I mean, they are a good team. And so to me, like you said, they stayed with them and there was fight there. They were getting good shots, I felt like. I wasn't, upset at the shots. And I think I think Will put this stat up. He comes out with the crazy stats that there's only been 15 losses this season of teams shooting over 50% from the field and over 40% from three. And the Kings have 4 of those 15 losses, but the Bulls did everything better. They did good they hit it mark for mark on offense and they played a little bit better defense. And so sometimes that's all that, that's all that matters and that's all that's going to matter for the Kings, unless you really start turning something around on the defensive end. Everybody else is just as good, if not better. Yes, I think we improved some talent, but to me, this was never a win now thing. I know a lot of people felt that way, but to me, this was just step one. You solidified, you made it clear who your essentially 2 guys, maybe a third in Harrison, are going to be, but everything else now is wide open. And so it's going to be up to Monty to hit on those follow-up steps to make, step one worth it. But I also think these 21 games are just as much of a tryout, essentially, you know what I mean, for everybody else, because there are so many guys coming off of contracts or on team options, things like that. And so It was interesting. We saw Lyles a little bit today in the first half. We didn't see it in the second, but I was wondering when that was going to happen. And he actually did okay when he came in. Like it wasn't, he had a couple baskets and stuff. But the sucky thing is if you have Richaun Holmes out there for 10 minutes and he's giving you just 2 rebounds, like it's either you're going to have to go to Jones or Lyles or someone else if he can't figure it out. Like I don't know how long you roll with it because I know he has stuff going on, off the court and everything else. But mentally, like if he just needs to sit and you know what I mean and get right with everything else that's going on, the team might have to go that way. But yeah, they
Yeah.
had at least 4 or 5 drop passes like right in the middle of the paint under the basket. I mean,
There
just
was a lot of those in the Brooklyn game
that were
too.
good that were good passes, but literally just hit brick hands. Um, and it's not just one guy. It's happening to multiple of them. But to me, that's kind of the bright spot is like I'm seeing the movement and I'm seeing the cuts and I'm seeing them, get good passes in there. They just have to catch them. Like to me, that should be the easiest part. Um, everything else you did to get up to that point was all the work. Now just catch it and finish it. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't too disappointed. I know, just King's timeline always can get kind of crazy, and so um,
Definitely can.
like you said, I was happy that they made it a game and continue to make it a game against a team who's going to be fighting for the championship. So
Yeah. And DeRozan's playing like an MVP. Literally some unguardable shots that were ridiculous. He's just a mid-range assassin where it's DiVincenzo and Mo Harkless with a hand in his face, and it just does not matter.
yeah,
DeRozan's hitting ridiculous shots, and even Alvin Gentry said post game, he's like, "Listen, like I think that we could have done a better job slowing down Kobe White when we were doubling DeRozan. But when it comes to DeRozan for the last 2 weeks, teams have thrown anything and everything at him, and none of it has worked. And he's
yep.
very right in that. Defensively, since the deadline, or since these moves that they've made, right? They beat the Wolves, they beat the Wizards, and then they lost to the Nets and Bulls in back-to-back games. Not back-to-back nights, but back-to-back games. And I think that we've seen growth defensively. Like what stands out to me, I don't think Sabonis stands out as a defender, which is actually a good thing because he doesn't stand out negatively either. Like I think that he's just a fine average defender while he's out there, and that's all you need from him when he's giving you ridiculous offensive production, right? I think the difference that I've seen that's been really notable is like their perimeter containment, right? And we heard Alvin Gentry talk about it. We heard him earlier in the year talk about all the time that they really struggled in that aspect. Like obviously Buddy Hield and Tyrese Halliburton fall into that. De'Aaron Fox falls into that. But you get rid of 2 of those guys, and instead you're just giving more minutes to Davion Mitchell, who's been really, really good recently, by the way. I should pull up his numbers here because his offensive growth has been phenomenal as well. But sticking on the defense for a second here first, he is getting more minutes, so that adds to the improvement in perimeter containment. And then you've also seen Donte DiVincenzo, who is very versatile defensively. Alvin said that he thinks he can guard 1, 2s, and 3s, which I think we've seen already in these 3 games, I believe it is, that DiVincenzo's played. We see a lot of more of
And then
3
even the
guard
2 of them
lineups.
together, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that duo is like, and when you have like Harkless out there, it's like all of a sudden, there's some possessions where I'm like, whoa, that was a really good defensive possession, and you would say that here and there throughout games earlier in the season, but it feels more often that I'm impressed with the defense, and it's a full 24 seconds. Um, yeah, I guess let's stick on the defense for a sec. Like, how impressed have you been with some of those changes? Because I think we are coming from a really low starting point. Um, and how much of a difference does it make moving forward? Because yeah, again, you're coming from a low starting point. Like, how much better do you think this team really is defensively right now?
Um, I mean, I don't necessarily know if you're going to see it in the numbers, but I think communication wise, it's pretty night and day. Um, and we've seen a lot more possessions of guys seemingly on a string, which is right, always what you want. I wish I would have counted in the last couple games how many possessions got to the last, under 5 seconds, of where it was legitimately good defense, and then, the Nets or the Bulls ended up still getting the basket with under 5 seconds left, just um, on a good shot or a lucky shot. But the fact that they're even, to me, it's a small bar, but the fact that you're containing guys, like you mentioned, longer into these possessions, it is progress. I think you can see a noticeable difference when Mitchell and Donte are on the floor, and at least in 4 games, their numbers speak for themselves. When you're looking at um, anything from a 3 to 5 man lineup, with when either one of them is in that lineup, the numbers are pretty night and day compared to um, when they're off. So, and to me, that's, kudos to them of being put again, right, in weird and new situations and continuing to show out on that side of the ball. But I also think that's it sets a good example for everybody else. When you see guys playing hard like that, it's very noticeable when you're not. Even when you have a 32-year-old Justin Holiday, like that's one of his things of his career was he was always 3-and-D. He's, towards, I don't want to say, I don't know how long he's going to be in the league left, but he's been around for a long time now. And, he still says he thinks he has enough for an extension, but he's still showing those 3-and-D numbers, right? He was 6 of 11 from 3 today. And he'll give you good defense. You've seen Mo, right? His offense is always off and on, but he's out there playing defense. And he had some good plays on DeRozan, but wasn't getting help from the calls or anything. But yeah, I think the length has helped again. You're seeing steals, deflections, again, things like that. To me, it doesn't look like anyone's completely lost, where we've had, a lot of the season where it looked like guys were lost out there on that side of the ball. So again, I mean, it's not huge, crazy adjustments, but to me, at least it's a step in the right direction of what they're trying to build. And even if you're going to lose, you're still trying to build that foundation of this is still how we want to play, regardless of what the outcome is going to be. If you can see that progress there and at least can show something for it, I think that goes a long way than just, tanking and looking like with nothing to actually build upon.
Yeah.
I'm fine with him losing. I'm fine with going for the 10, and I'm fine with losing these kind of games because I still think they need that talent, right? And however it's going to come, the Bulls showed you a completely different way that you can build a team in a season, but you have to be able to actually land those players, and that's, not easier said than done. And so it's easier said than done. So yeah, it's progress. I feel like we've seen some good fourth quarter kind of like clamping down on defense compared to previous games where before, at least leading up to the deadline, like we said, there wasn't going to be in a fight, and we had those like 30-point blowouts. These ones we're actually seeing them fight in it and lock down a little bit, harder on defense into the fourth, and which is what good teams end up doing. So again, like anytime you can have those kind of you can start showing that consistently,
Right.
that's progress. And I think that's still overall the biggest weakness of this team is consistency. And that's going to be hard when you have 6 new guys, depending on who's going to play any given night. But if they can find any kind of consistency, that's going to go a long way for them offensively and defensively.
Yeah, Alvin said that they don't get to practice until Tuesday, per league rules, which obviously is a little unfortunate with having 6 new guys. But I think that they also can use the break. Like Justin Holiday, for example, said he hasn't seen his family in a while since he's been traded, and I'm sure guys like De'Aaron Fox, who was dealing with that lingering ankle thing, which, had, I think some people were questioning a little bit, but he's had ankle injuries in the past, and I think it's just good for guys to get a little bit of a break, right? Like Davion Mitchell didn't play tonight, and he had this right hand contusion, I guess, that was going on, that Alvin said if it was like a really big game, we would have put him out there. But I think that this is one before an extended break. It just didn't make sense to risk it, which makes a lot of sense to me. So I get where they're coming from there. And to stick on Davion a little bit here, these last 10 games we've seen from him, like, it's funny. It felt like I went on 13-20 D'Lo and KC and kind of was like, I feel like we're at a point where maybe we have to question, it was his senior season at Baylor an outlier shooting, because he was shooting the ball really poorly earlier this year. And the last 10 games, since he moved into the starting lineup right after their loss in Boston, he moved into the starting lineup, and last 10 games, 16.1 points for Davion Mitchell, 4.6 assists. Everybody's talking about the scoring. The passing jump has been really impressive from him too. And that's on 45% from the field, 39% from three on just under 7 attempts per game. And he still doesn't really get to the free throw line or honestly convert when he does. But that's just not exactly a part of his game right now. But like the offensive jump we've seen from Davion, it doesn't exactly feel like anything that's streaky shooting or unsustainable or anything like that either, right?
I don't think so. And I just keep going back to, this is his second year with his new shooting form too. He used that whole, off year of his, when he had to, when he ended up transferring schools to, he said, completely change his form to, do whatever he had to do to get to the league. And so, I just keep thinking that way. And we've seen guys in the league like the Lonzos, right, of the world in the last, couple seasons completely change their the foundation of their shot and the mechanics and find consistency in the league. And so, and from what everyone said, like, he's such a hard worker, it just feels like he's gonna do whatever he has to do to make it work. And I think a lot of it too is him kind of learning and adjusting and, the tricks, of what he can pick on, of what works maybe with his style. And getting the minutes, right? And getting the touches more so than he was getting before. I also think there's maybe more of a trust thing and a confidence there that maybe, as that builds as it goes. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's anything that's not sustainable, because it's not. I mean, he's doing everything within the flow of what he was kind of doing before, except maybe being a little bit more aggressive, but that also comes with opportunity. But he's doing it within the flow of everything, which is cool. And you're seeing kind of a pairing with him with Sabonis as well. And so I think that's, good going forward. And then the pairing with Donte, if that can be sustainable, I'm happy for him, because it's, like, we know the defensive side is there, and the biggest question mark was, can the other part be consistent? And so within the last month, it's been there. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how the next 21 games go. But he seems to be impressing a lot of people, not just here, but around the league and what they're seeing. So.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to see. Mark Schindler wrote on it earlier today. I think he put it out when we're talking about this today, and everyone always read Mark Schindler. We had him on the pod recently. I want to say it's M Schindler NBA. I hope I'm right about that, Mark. And yeah, I mean, I think you've definitely seen the improvement from Davion. Like, I asked him at a practice earlier this year, I think when the shot was kind of just starting to go down a little bit more often, and he said at Baylor that he was kind of getting ignored sometimes from the perimeter, but at some point it started to go down, and teams started paying attention to him. And once he, I think it's a big mental thing when you're getting ignored on offense, and where teams don't care about defending you when you're on the perimeter. I would assume that really messes with your mental. I think we've seen that at times with Chimezie Metu, at times with De'Aaron Fox. Like, when you're wide open, you hear often that, like, that's the hardest shot to hit. And I think that once you start to get a little bit of a rhythm and a confidence is kind of what we're seeing with Davion at this point, and him emerging on offense while still being the contributor and difference maker, making an impact on defense that we've seen him be already in his rookie season. And it's like, I know we talk about, for good reason, him being older, 23 years old coming into the league, and how that maybe changes his ceiling or his projection when you're talking about what to expect from him, and how what it means for him going forward throughout his NBA career. Like, it is important to factor in, but I think that there is an aspect of, like, this is his first year in the NBA, where there still is a lot of growth that you're going to see in Davion Mitchell's game. It's like, I understand the age factor, and it's important to mention, but there is growth that you're going to see from Davion. You're already starting to see, and I think there's just going to be more as time goes on. And I do really like his fit with Donte DiVincenzo, like you pointed out. And I want to ask you a little bit about kind of all three of these guys, but more so DiVincenzo and Holiday, because both of those guys are really good defenders. I think they're the difference in why we're able to say that the team actually has these moments of really good perimeter containment compared to what we saw 5 games ago even. But sometimes the shots are a little much for me. I like the shooting that we're getting. I think that they both provide a high level of shooting that this team really, really needs. But sometimes it's a little streaky, and I get bothered by the shots when you're like kind of open and there's still 15, 18 seconds left on the shot clock. I'm like, did we really need to be pulling that? Like, the team really, really needs spacing around Fox and Sabonis. They need as much shooting as possible, and it's clear there's not enough at times right now. But sometimes the shooting's just a little bit much.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. And I want to say, I don't know if it was, might have been James, might have been Ham that said that Donte like was on the court and asked Gentry like, "Do you want me to keep going? Like, or was that okay?" And he's like, "Well, were you open?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, okay then, like go." But I want to say part of it, I think for him is because I think this was what, game 19, 20 of the season for him, that he probably has the more of a green light than anybody else just because they're trying to get him maybe finding a rhythm or just getting the shots up in general that he didn't get, you know what I mean, to start the season. Um, but with the others, yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of early in the shot clock unless you're getting what, like an open layup or, you know, a dunk or something like that. But I even feel like there are times where Sabonis has it in the paint, right? And I want him to be more aggressive rather than throwing it back out. But his mind, he's probably like, well, there's still 15 seconds left. Like, I can throw it back out and, you know, and move it back around. But there were times where I was like, oh, you could have, you know, hooked that over Vooch. Like, Vooch defense is not necessarily what he's known for. So there were times where I thought he could have been a little bit more aggressive rather than passing it out, because I do think our wings are not shy necessarily on getting the shots up. And I guess, like, I mean, tonight, um Holiday was what, 6 of 11, and then Barnes I think was around 60. I mean, I think
Yeah,
even
2 of
Fox was
3.
up there. Yeah, Barnes 2 or 3. Fox had 5 threes. Donte had shot 5. Mezzi had
Yeah.
4. That's where I think where Mezzi shines when he's cutting, when he's going to the
Yes.
basket. Like, to me, I love that part of the game for him. Um, but yeah. But
Yeah.
and it's interesting we only got 1 game of Jeremy Lamb. Like, I'm really curious when, like, they put him back, how he's going to fit into this. Like, whose minutes is he getting? I because he had a decent first game. Like,
Yeah.
he missed some shots early, but then kind of got hot and actually had some good assists, rebounds. Um,
Yeah, and then he's
I'm
been
really
out since
curious
with this
how
like
Gentry's
left
gonna
ankle soreness.
work this. Yeah. And I mean, again, who knows if that's an he's had his injury issues right previously, and so they said that they wanted to take it into the All-Star break and have him heal up. And whether that's genuinely true or if they're trying to get minutes for other guys, I guess we'll find out.
Right.
um, but I was thinking about that today, watching the last two games, because it seems like they just threw Donte in right where basically where he was. Um,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would. I
but I don't want
feel
Fox
kind of
getting 40
bad.
minutes a night necessarily
Yeah,
either. Like I don't want to
yeah,
overplay his health either at this point.
yeah.
Um,
And when Davion is active, I think like you won't see quite that extent.
yeah,
To me, it's kind of. I mean, the Met 2 minutes are a little rough. I agree. He's been really good as a cutter, and I think Sabonis obviously enables guys that are good at that. To me, though, like if I'm trying to find a spot for Jeremy Lamb, it's weird and you're very
yeah.
small, but I almost am eating away some of Chimezi Metu's minutes in my mind.
Yeah, and I am surprised they haven't tried Lyles more than they have already, and maybe that's something that's coming. But just based on his rebounding and his defense at the rim is actually a lot better than I thought going into it. Um, he's in like the 70 or 80th percentile in the league when it actually comes to um, guarding at the rim, at least in his right the minutes he's given. And so, I mean, this is where I would use these 21 games to throw guys out there and see what you have. He has a team option next year. Like, what do we have? He can stretch the floor. At least he has shown in 5 seasons of the league where he was shot over 35% from three.
Yeah,
We need some spacers.
and he
Why
can
not see if
rebound.
he right? Why not see if he can work with any of these guys? Um, so I know we got 5 minutes of him today, and he was 2 for 2 from the field and 2 rebounds in 5 minutes. Not that bad. I mean, his 5 minutes were better than Richaun Holmes' 10 minutes at this point, which, like, at the beginning of the year, I would have thought would not have been possible. And I feel like again, I feel bad because I know he's going through stuff um, off the court just as much as on the court. But again, like at some point, I'm wondering when they're going to start trying other things, and especially because Davion Jones was actually playing really well. I mean, that's
Yeah,
he was showing he was earning those minutes too. So um, it's going to be interesting for Gentry to see how the rest of this is going to go.
yeah, definitely. Totally with you. Damian Jones was playing really, really well, like you said, prior to the Sabonis edition, and I mean, to be blunt, was outplaying Richaun Holmes. And it wouldn't surprise me if there was an aspect. I've kind of heard that there is an aspect of like the front office feeling like Richaun Holmes does need to be out there because he can't just completely lose any sort of trade value. I would assume that they are going to try to trade him at the deadline. That's just, I mean, sorry, not at the deadline in the offseason. And I still think that there's like he should be viewed as a good value contract. But you are risking that no longer becoming the case.
Yeah,
It's
but
a weird
this
situation.
this is where my thing too. It's like we see teams tank and sit guys all the time. So to me, like him even sitting to me doesn't even show that he's losing value at this point. Like to me, if you don't know what he is already, I mean, like I don't know what else you need to see. Um,
Yeah, I guess it'd be just
I
like a
just know
leverage
these games
thing.
aren't helping, right? Like seeing him 10 minutes off the bench, all you're showing is that that's not working right now. But we've seen a completely different person when he's starting. So it's like, um, I don't think this is necessarily showcasing, his best attributes. I think his 2 years that he started here to me showed the best of what he did, and then you saw him come off the bench in Phoenix, right, and succeed. To me, that's what Richaun Holmes is, not this injury riddled, like just he's just never been able to get a flow going, and I don't even like playing with the goggles. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's messing with his eyesight, like, because all of a sudden he can't catch the ball, and that's not normal for him
Right.
either. So I just know at this point, yeah, it hasn't been great. And when you look at the previous games from Damian Jones, I mean, it's 12 points, 17 points, 7 points, 18 points,
Yeah.
9. And he's giving you rebounds. So
Yeah, and he's a lob
it
threat. He's protecting the
right.
rim.
So I mean, yeah. I mean, there was a good stretch where he was averaging almost 2 blocks a game and
Yeah.
almost 1 steal. So when he was getting his minutes. So and he's one that shows he can get, like, 10 to 16 minutes and still give you something. So we keep saying it's going to be interesting to see how Gentry plays this out, and what their true goal is. To me, it seems like if we win and make a play for the 10, cool. But it also very much seems like if they don't, they're not gonna. The front
Right.
office isn't gonna lose sleep over it.
Right. Yeah, being in a better draft position certainly doesn't hurt. And I don't know how much like making that 10 seed does really. Like I think it'd be
Right.
great experience to play in high pressure games like that
It'd be good for
matter to that
Fox, right?
extent.
Because
It'd be really good.
Fox and Mitchell, because everybody else at this point, because since the trades have already experienced playoff basketball. So it's not like we have a team full of guys who don't know the feeling anymore. We have Fox and
Yeah.
Mitchell, who's a second year. So to me, it'd be more so, that putting him in that high pressure situation. But I'd also think he'd rather have a better chance at talent. But again, you never know. I mean, well, if he asks a player, most of them will always say they want the smoke, right? Or they
Yeah.
want the fire, and then
And I think for Darren, a chance to like
but
prove that he can
yeah,
to shut
he can
up
do it.
shut everybody up and play. I mean, the way that he's been playing recently, like these last 5 games, in this one against the Bulls, he was just on fire early, and he ends the game with 33 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 steals. There are 5 turnovers in there. I want to say 2 of them came late and were really bad turnovers. But 14 of 26 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3. The game before, he has 20. He has 26 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, 9 of 18 from the field. Before that, 26, 4 and 2 on 10 of 21. 27, 3 and 8 on 10 of 20. In the game before that, 29, 6 and 7 on 11 of 22. He scored at least 25 points in 6 straight games. He's playing really, really good basketball right now. And I think that, when it comes to like the play-in thing, if he were to really go out there and drop 30 and 5 in a high leverage game and do something like he did in that game against Washington, take over in the fourth quarter, like I think that would do a lot for, I think, just the public's impression of
Sure.
De'Aaron Fox. But at the same time, like team building wise, obviously it would mean a lot to end up with a top 5 pick. And it's interesting, like
Yeah.
they can end up with the 10 spot, win the play-in, and still you're locked into those odds of what they were at the end of the regular season prior to those play-in games. So you have like a weird, I guess you could call that a balance there. But Fox has been playing really well. And then I want to talk about Sabonis' play since he's joined as well before we kind of get out of here. That first game against Minnesota, obviously, he was great. 22 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 assists on 10 of 19 from the field. The next one against Washington, you see him do a little bit of everything once again. 16 points, 7 assists, 11 rebounds. And then against Brooklyn, it was kind of weird. Like Gentry pulled him. The minute, I don't think that Gentry managed the rotation very well in Brooklyn. I think he's gotten a lot of slack and deservedly so. And after I kind of asked him about, it seems like you're playing Fox and Sabonis together a lot and trying to do that. Is that to get them chemistry? Or he's like, ideally we should have one of those guys on the floor at all times. So I'm like, okay, well, that didn't really happen, but I agree with you. And yeah, in that Brooklyn game, in only 25 minutes that Sabonis played, he had 9 points, 2 assists, and 9 rebounds. And then Sabonis came out post-game himself and said that, he needs to be better, that he needs to score more often, that that's why the Kings traded for him, and he needs to kind of impose his will a little bit more often. And then he comes out against the Bulls and does that. 22 points, 8 assists, and 12 rebounds, 2 steals in there as well on 10 of 15 from the field. You mentioned earlier, like, I don't think Vucevic should be able to guard Sabonis, and he really couldn't. I think Sabonis could have even put up more points than he did tonight.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where he said he's still trying to figure this team out, because when you look at his free throw attempts on average, right, since he's been here, his highest is 3, right? He had a 13 not that long ago. 12, 10, 8, 7. Like,
He's not doing the post-ups.
it's correct. And like I said, he's kind of passing out a lot of it pretty quickly. But I also think, like he said, that's him trying to feel these guys out. And so, again, in the long term, I'm not really worried as much about that. But I do think that's something to keep an eye on. And I'm sure it's being said to him that be more aggressive down there, because he has such good hands and a feel for it when he's down at the rim. So yeah, I do want him to, be more aggressive in that sense, because I don't feel like he's put shots up and I'm like, oh, he's not getting the calls. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like he hasn't shot him. So I would say for people watching, know that that's usually more part of his game. On average, he is getting pretty close to, I want to say 7. I'm just going down at least from this season. So yeah, I mean, that's something I would look up for. So hold on, I was trying to go to career to see what is splits per. Yeah, he was averaging 5.3 before he got here. He hasn't had a 5 yet, so hopefully that gets up.
And I think part of the complication with him posting up is just like the lack of spacing on this team. And I think that's obviously the major thing that they'll need to address going into this offseason. And I think we'll see that happen. That's kind of the beauty of, like, I feel weird. I guess I should walk back. I was going to say the beauty of moving Halliburton, because obviously that was heartbreaking, I think, for every Kings fan involved. But they didn't include any picks, is my point here. And
Yeah,
they
I
still
know what you
have
mean. Yeah.
all that way, all those assets to still go out and make additional moves. Like, if you jump into the top 4, I honestly, like, it's a win-win. Like, you can keep that pick, and if you feel good about one of those guys that's there, adding them to this roster and moving forward with that sort of bright future piece, then great. But at the same time, a top 4 picks holds so much value around the league in the trade market. So I think that they're going to be in an interesting situation this offseason.
Yep.
And I think, just to close here, where do you feel like the team has just what do you feel like is different? What do you expect to kind of be different with the viewing experience based on these games that we've seen over these final I think it's 21 games left this season?
I'm seeing a fight, even if they're not winning. I'm seeing guys that care, or out there at least going for it. And as a fan, right, like, at the end of the day, I want to be entertained.
Yeah.
Win or lose, show me you left it all out there, and I can live with that. Especially knowing that this is not a finished product, right? Like, I'm not watching the Bulls. I'm not expecting them to win and they're a 1 seed. Like, I very much know where we are. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how these guys continue to gel and mesh, and if they can or if they can't. And for the first time, like we always were talking about, what was going to be the big move, what we were waiting, right? Now it happened. And I feel like that's even more pressure on him now to keep going, to complete it. So I'm excited, like you said, that he has his picks. He still has multiple player assets, right? That he can move. And so I'm excited to see these guys, fight the last 21 games and see what happens. Because again, we know players are going out there to win. So if they can pull it off, kudos to them. And if not, like we said, hopefully the odds are in our favor.
Yeah, there you go. I think that that seeing that fight, and yeah, we've heard that like we got Justin Holiday post game today, and he's talking about again doubling down on this being such a high IQ team, and that's just so freaking weird to hear after what was like a week ago. But you can see it, and I think that yeah, it's apparent on the floor that they're communicating well, that you have a bunch of high IQ guys that are out there. I think that once they get a little bit of a familiarity, I always struggle with this word, alongside each other, that there won't be as many of these drop passes because you're not expecting it. Like I think Metu, Harkless, still kind of, even DiVincenzo getting used to these bullet bounce passes from Sabonis and just capitalizing on these backdoor cuts more often and such. So yeah, I mean, I think that for me, rest of the year, it's like, how much better can this team be defensively, and how often can they do that consistently? Like you said earlier, the two-man game of Fox and Sabonis, and I think we've seen Fox be optimized, but at the same time, optimizing Sabonis in the same games is going to be interesting, and how can they work in those post-ups? And yeah, do we see any of Trey Lyles or Josh Jackson and Jeremy Lamb? Like, I don't care all too much for any of those guys, to be honest, but you don't know. I think that they all could be something. So I think it'll be interesting to see as the year goes on. And of course, any sort of development from Donte DiVincenzo, Davion Mitchell, like the guys that you also expect to be here long term, is going to be something to keep an eye on. But if nothing else, like, I'm excited to watch the rest of this season.
Yeah. And I'm excited to see how Dante does right for the rest of the season, because we know, like he said, we know he's not 100%. And at this point, I wouldn't expect him to be. But to see if he can find that rhythm. But we could see it then, and we could see it now, of why Monty had targeted that piece as the bogey like replacement, right? At the time. So I'm excited to see if he can find his 3-point shot again. Because when it goes in, it looks really pretty.
Yeah.
And he, what sucks is he was doing it before he got hurt, and that's the hard thing. And so, I hope, he's young. You hope he can get it back, but those Villanova players, you usually bet on them. So
Yeah.
And you can see the defense is still there, and that's half the battle for me. So the rest of it, I think, will come.
Totally. Yeah, I think that, it's too small for me to like have pulled the numbers right now of a sample size since he came to Sacramento, but the off the catch threes feel really good. The off the dribble right now, a little much. But also if he starts converting those at a good rate, like the ceiling of this player becomes way more than I think that it's currently projected to be right now. So I certainly don't mind it. I think it just might need to be reined in a little bit. And yeah, just he's still coming back from this injury. So I think that how he plays out the rest of this year is going to be really interesting for what it looks like in restricted free agency for him.
They seem to be getting him at the time for the best value. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I mean, compared to the Pacers, what was it, Jalen Smith right now, where he's just going off. And now they're worried if they will be able to pay him because the Suns didn't pick up his option. So you have that Harry Giles situation, but this guy doesn't have injury history or anything like that, and it's just going off. So that's a name that will be interesting too. If he can keep showing that, that's a team even the Kings could be looking at as a stretch guy. So yeah, there's a lot of time to see what these guys have.
Definitely. We'll have to see. And we do get a little bit of entertainment during this All-Star break. Davion Mitchell is going to be part of the Rising Stars Challenge. Alvin Gentry said that he doesn't think the whole hand thing is going to hold him out of any sort of All-Star festivities.
Yeah, they announced him as a replacement for Duarte today too.
For some other rookie thing that I
Yeah.
honestly don't
I
know
didn't. I
what
had never
the
heard of
name
it
is
before.
right now.
Yeah.
Sean Cunningham has it on Twitter. I know that. Um, but yeah, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Just kind of wanted to do a little bit of a rundown of what we've seen that's been new. And it's small sample size. There's still more games to be played, but there's new things to look out for, which I think is exciting. Can't say thanks enough, Jill, for having you on. It's always good talking with you. Anybody not following Jill, it's at Jill Adge on Twitter, which I'm sure everybody listening already is, but I have to throw it out there. Podcast is Ethos Kings. Anything else I'm missing, Jill?
Nope, that's it. No, thank you again for having me on. It's always fun.
Yeah, always great having you on. And anybody listening, definitely go check out the King's Herald. They just dropped their Fox and Ox merch, which I think looks pretty damn good. A lot of people drop in Fox and Ox merch. I think the King's Herald one is the best. Not that the other ones aren't good, but of course I'm going to say this. Take a look at the Patreon to support local independent Kings coverage and all the great work going on from the guys and gals there, myself included. Consistently as this year continues. And if you enjoyed this episode of the King's Pulse podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. And you hear from us again in the next couple of days.